Once you retire, upgrade these 10 things before you tell anyone. I'm telling you this not as theory, not as something I read in a book, but as a man who has watched decades pass, who has seen friends retire well and others quietly struggle. And I'll tell you something most people don't expect. The moment you tell the world you've retired, your life begins to fill up with noise. Invitations, expectations, spending, opinions. But the real work, the quiet work that determines whether your next 20 or 30 years feel secure or fragile, that work needs to happen before anyone even knows you've stepped away. You see, retirement is not just stopping work. It is stepping into a completely different system of living. When I left my working years behind, I thought I was prepared. I had savings, I had a plan, or at least I believed I did. But what I came to understand, sometimes the hard way, is that the first year or two after retirement quietly sets the tone for everything that follows. And that's why I want to walk you through this slowly, carefully, like I would if we were sitting together in the same room. Let me begin with the first thing you must upgrade: your health insurance. Now, when you are working, this is something you hardly think about. It's there, it's deducted, it's handled. But the moment you step away from your job, that safety net disappears. And if you retire before you're eligible for Medicare, you're suddenly responsible for building that bridge yourself. I've seen people wait until after their last day to figure this out. And I'll tell you plainly, that is a mistake. Because the way you structure your income in retirement affects what kind of coverage you can afford, what subsidies you qualify for, and how much you'll pay over the years. This isn't just about having insurance. It's about having the right structure in place before your income becomes unpredictable. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, realizing that a small miscalculation could cost me thousands over time. So take your time with this one, quietly, carefully, before the world starts knocking on your door. Now, the second upgrade, and this one is often ignored longer than it should be, is your estate documents. I don't care if you made a will 20 years ago when your children were young and your life looked completely different. That document does not know who you are today. Retirement changes your financial picture. It changes your accounts, your priorities, your relationships even. And yet so many people carry around outdated documents like old photographs, never realizing how dangerous that can be. I had a friend, good man, careful man, who passed unexpectedly, and his documents hadn't been updated in years. What followed was confusion, delays, and unnecessary stress for his family. That's not what you want to leave behind. You want clarity. You want your wishes to be carried out without question. So take the time to revisit everything: your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare directives. Not someday, not next year. Now, while you still have the clarity and the calm to do it right. And then we move to the third upgrade, your cash reserves. Now, this one feels simple on the surface, but it's deeper than most people think. During your working years, you might have kept a few months of expenses tucked away, knowing another paycheck was always coming. But retirement is different. There is no automatic refill. Every dollar you spend comes from somewhere you've already built. So your cash reserve becomes more than a buffer. It becomes a layer of protection between your daily life and your investments. I learned this during a time when the markets were unstable, and I watched people forced to sell assets at the worst possible moments just to cover expenses. That's not a position you want to be in. You want enough accessible cash to handle emergencies, to cover unexpected costs, and even to prepare for larger expenses you know are coming. A car, a repair, a trip you've been dreaming about. Set that money aside before you start drawing from your portfolio, because when life happens, and it will, you want to respond calmly, not react under pressure. Now let's talk about the fourth upgrade, your tax plan. And I'll be honest with you, this is where many people quietly lose more money than they ever expected. When you're working, taxes feel straightforward. You earn, you deduct, you file, But in retirement, taxes become a long game. Every withdrawal you make, every decision about where your money comes from, shapes not just this year's tax bill, but the next 20 or 30 years. I didn't fully appreciate this at first. I thought in terms of the present, what bracket I was in, what I owed now. But retirement demands a broader view. You have opportunities early on, before certain rules kick in, before required distributions begin, to make decisions that can reduce your lifetime tax burden significantly. But those opportunities don't wait forever. If you don't act intentionally, the system will act for you. And it won't always be in your favor. So you need to think beyond April. You need to think in decades. And now we come to the fifth upgrade, your insurance coverage. Not the one you had while you were working, but the one that actually fits your life now. This is where you must be honest with yourself. The policies that made sense years ago may no longer serve a purpose. Disability insurance, for example. What is it protecting if you no longer earn an income? Life insurance, does your spouse truly need it? Or are you paying premiums out of habit? I've seen people carry unnecessary policies for years simply because they never stop to reassess. And at the same time, I've seen others overlook the protections that matter more in retirement. Liability coverage, protection against unexpected legal risks, planning for long-term care. These are not pleasant topics, I know, but they are real, and ignoring them does not make them disappear. So you step back, you review everything, and you reshape your coverage to match the life you're actually living now, not the one you left behind. Now, if you've been listening closely, you'll notice something about these first 5 upgrades. None of them are exciting. None of them are things you'll want to celebrate or talk about at a dinner table, but they are the quiet foundation, the kind that holds everything steady when life begins to move again. And in the next part, I'm going to walk you through the remaining 5, because this is where your daily life, your income, and even your legacy begin to take their final shape. But as we move forward, you'll begin to see how these next pieces connect to everything we've already talked about. Because retirement, when you really look at it closely, is not a collection of separate decisions. It's one long thread. Pull it carelessly in one place, and something else tightens where you didn't expect. So let me take you to the 6th upgrade, and that is your Social Security strategy. Now, most people think this decision is simple. They look at a statement, they see a number at age 62, another at 67, another at 70, and they pick the one that feels right. Maybe the biggest check, maybe the earliest date. But I'll tell you, after watching so many people go through this, that approach misses the real question entirely. This is not about choosing the biggest monthly benefit. It's about understanding how that benefit interacts with everything else you've built, your withdrawals, your taxes, even how much of that Social Security income ends up being taxed in the first place. I've sat across from people who claimed early because they wanted to get their money, only to find years later that they had quietly increased their tax burden in ways they never anticipated. And the thing is, once you make that decision, you're living with it. So you don't rush this. You step back, you look at the full picture, and you ask yourself not what gives me the most today, but what gives me the most flexibility over time. Now we move to the 7th upgrade, your withdrawal strategy. And this one, I can tell you from experience, is where retirement truly begins to feel real. Because during your working years, the question was always, how much can I save? But now the question flips completely. It becomes, where does my income come from? And if you don't have a clear answer, you'll default to whatever feels easiest. That's what most people do. They go to the account that's most accessible, the one they've used before, and they start pulling from it without thinking too far ahead. But every dollar you withdraw has consequences. It affects your taxes, your future balances, even your eligibility for certain benefits. I remember the first time I had to make that decision. It felt simple in the moment, but looking back, I realize how much better it could have been with a little more planning. So you want to map this out before you begin. Which accounts you draw from first? Which ones you allow to grow? When you might convert funds from one type to another? This is not guesswork. This is structure. And once you have it, everything else becomes calmer. Now let's talk about the 8th upgrade, your beneficiary designations. And this is one of those quiet details that people overlook. And yet it can override everything else you think you've put in place. You might have a will, you might even have a trust, but the names listed on your accounts, those forms you filled out years ago, those are what actually control where your money goes. I've seen situations where everything looked perfectly planned on paper, but an outdated beneficiary form sent assets somewhere completely unintended to an ex-spouse, to the wrong family member, or into a situation that created unnecessary taxes and legal complications. And the tragedy is, it's so easy to fix. It doesn't take days or weeks. It takes a little time, a bit of attention, and the willingness to make sure your past decisions still reflect your present wishes. So you go through each account one by one and you make sure everything aligns quietly, thoroughly, without delay. Now we come to the 9th upgrade, your spending awareness. And I'll tell you, this one surprises people more than any other, because most of us think we know what we spend. We have a rough number in our heads, something that feels about right. But retirement doesn't operate on rough estimates. It operates on reality, because now every dollar you spend is a dollar that must be replaced by a withdrawal, and every withdrawal has a ripple effect. I've watched people enter retirement feeling comfortable, only to drift into spending patterns they never tracked, never questioned. Little things at first, a few extra dinners, a trip here, a purchase there, and over time, those small decisions become a pattern. So what I always tell people, and what I learned myself, is that you need to observe your spending honestly, especially in those first few months. Not to restrict yourself, not to take away your enjoyment, but to understand your true baseline. Because once you know that number, you can build everything else around it with confidence. Without it, you're navigating in the dark. And finally, we arrive at the 10th upgrade, and this is the one that, in my experience, carries more emotional weight than most people expect. Your survivor plan. Now, this is not an easy conversation. I've sat with couples where one person leans in, listens carefully, and the other looks away. Not because they don't care, but because it's uncomfortable. It forces you to think about a time when one of you is no longer there. But here's the truth. Retirement planning is not complete until you've looked at that reality clearly. Because when one spouse passes, everything changes. Income often drops, especially with Social Security. And at the same time, taxes can increase because the surviving spouse files alone in a different set of brackets. I've seen situations where the household income decreased, but the tax burden increased. And that's a difficult position to be in, especially during a time that's already emotionally heavy. So you don't ignore this. You don't assume things will work out. You look at the numbers. You understand what happens under that scenario. And if adjustments need to be made, if certain strategies can reduce that burden, you consider them while you still have the ability to act together. And now, when you step back and look at all 10 of these upgrades, you begin to understand why I told you at the beginning, do this before you tell anyone. Because the moment you announce your retirement, the world responds. Your calendar fills. People want your time. Opportunities appear, and so do expectations. And suddenly the quiet space you needed to think, it's gone. I've seen it happen over and over again. Good people, thoughtful people, who simply didn't give themselves that window of calm before everything else began. So give yourself that gift, that space. Sit with these decisions while your mind is still clear, while your time is still your own. There is no rush to announce anything. Retirement is not a performance. It's a transition, a deeply personal one. I've lived long enough to know that the small, quiet decisions we make when no one is watching, those are the ones that shape the years ahead. Not the celebrations, not the announcements, but the preparation. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you take these words seriously, and more importantly, I hope you take care of yourself and the life you've worked so hard to build. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.